A Song of Ice and Fire fans, House of the Dragon fans, is this a safe place for me to talk about a theory? And I just want to say straight out the gate that I do know what happens in Fire and Blood, even though I am not a book expert. I am well versed in what happens in the book. However, between the changes from the book to the show, and again, this will sound like I am excusing things from the show, but I've started to think of it as historical revisionism, that the book is a compilation of secondhand sources and they all contradict each other, or they have a different take, or it's almost like, at least in the case of Mushroom, it's just a glorified gossip rag. But gossip is still journalism. So the events of Fire and Blood are told from the perspectives of three people who were 95% of the time not there. So I have seen the TV show as and again, this is going to sound like I'm forgiving the TV show, but more of the real story, or what happens behind closed doors. Because how are the sources in Fire and Blood supposed to know about everything that happens behind closed doors, or everybody's motive? A great example of this, I think, is that during the face-off between Aemond and Lucerys, the look on Aemond's face after Vhagar disobeys him and makes a snack out of little Luke, the look on Aemond's face is of pure shock and horror, because to me it translated to, nobody is ever going to believe that I didn't do this on purpose. And history remembers that event as cold-blooded kinslay. Because to the outside perspective, that's exactly what it was. We're not getting Aemond Targaryen's perspective on this event in Fire and Blood. Fire and Blood is interpreting that interpersonal event between two people whose story is being told in secondhand. So as a result, I've become really fascinated by the idea that Fire and Blood, the book, is essentially the history that is chosen to be remembered, or it is showing a degree of unreliable narration or historical revisionism. This is where my theory comes in, and people might throw me in the dragon pit for this one. I'm just gonna spit it out and say it, but I've been thinking about, what if Rhaena and Nettles were the same person, or at the very least that Nettles herself does not exist? What if all of those actions were actually done by Rhaena? Because in Fire and Blood, again, spoilers for Fire and Blood, Rhaena basically outlives everybody. So much so that on her A Song of Ice and Fire Wikia page that I've read several times over the last week, her death isn't even recorded because she outlives everybody to the point where she essentially lives happily ever after. She marries twice, she has like 6 kids, and Westerosi history remembers her extremely fondly. In the book, she went to the Vale with 3 dragon eggs to play glorified babysitter, and one of the dragons hatched, and that was the dragon Morning. I believe Morning was the last dragon that ever hatched before Daenerys' dragons. Now, the show implies that the 3 dragon eggs sent to the Vale are Daenerys' dragons, even though it's more complicated than that. If you read the book, that's not really a confirm or a denial. Nettles, on the other hand, was an orphan in Driftmark that is rumored to be Daemon's bastard daughter. There's also really wild rumors over whether she's his bastard daughter or his lover. A very important part of this that I want to bring up is that in Fire and Blood, Nettles was there during the Battle of the Gullet. Fire and Blood also talks about the fact that while everybody else was celebrating their victory over the Triarchy, Nettles was upset because Jace died. And then really the other main thing that we hear about Nettles is that she goes with Daemon to Harrenhal to wait for Aemond, and that's where the Daemon and Aemond face-off occurs, is at Harrenhal in the Battle of the God's Eye. And this is where some of the rumors start to kick in, that Mushroom says that the two were lovers, but Gildane, who most readers attribute to being George's narration or George's voice in this book, that's where Gildane says that they were father and daughter, and that Daemon doted on his bastard daughter. Now, will this be interpreted as, in the show, Rhaena was kind of neglected by Daemon because she didn't have a dragon, but then once she got a dragon, he gave a fuck about her? Because I have a feeling that that's going to be part of this whole story, is that she's going to say that she did what she did because she just wanted to help, because nobody ever took her seriously and her dad didn't treat her the same as he treated Baela. I just discovered something else while I was reading about this theory and telling you about it. So in the book, Mysaria plants it in Rhaenyra's head that Nettles and Daemon are lovers, and this causes some tension between Rhaenyra and Daemon, saying that Nettles had Daemon under a spell and that there was witchcraft involved. Fire and Blood also states that because Rhaenyra believed Daemon was under a spell, she sent a raven to Maidenpool saying that they should kill Nettles, but not to do Daemon any harm. And the people who received that raven pretended they didn't receive it because they didn't want to piss Daemon off. And then the thing that I just realized as I was reading this, so after receiving word about that whole situation, Daemon sent Nettles away the next morning. And Fire and Blood says that Nettles killed a black ram and fed it to her dragon and then flew into the morning mists of the Bay of Crabs. This is really interesting because the first episode of season 3 just essentially confirmed that the black goat you've been seeing around Harrenhal is Alice Rivers. Is Fire and Blood saying that Nettles or Rhaena is going to kill Alice Rivers and feed her to Sheep Stealer? I don't know. I'm just saying that I just realized that. It also said in Fire and Blood that after Daemon sends Nettles away, the last recorded incident that we hear about Nettles and Sheep Stealer is that there was a bad interaction / battle between Aegon II's forces and Nettles and Sheep Stealer. And after that, there is no recorded sighting of either of them ever again in Westeros history. You're probably saying, Gia, get to the point. What's your point? My point / theory, and please don't throw me in the dragon pit for this one, but I merely wish to suggest that perhaps Nettles as a person never existed, and history invented a whole new person separate from Rhaena, and that Rhaena is actually Nettles. Rhaena is remembered very favorably. She's like the only character who has like 0 to no role in the dance at all, which is kind of suspicious to me because how are you a part of the Targaryen family line and the most important thing you did during the entire dance was play babysitter in the Vale and hatch I think the last dragon to ever hatch ever until Daenerys' dragons. That's it? That's suspicious to me. In conclusion, it is my theory that Nettles, an orphan that was born on Driftmark and is rumored to be the bastard daughter of Daemon Targaryen, is actually Rhaena, who was born and raised on Driftmark and is a true-born daughter of Daemon Targaryen. And she did some shit on accident, got Prince Jacaerys killed, fucked over the Battle of the Gullet, and in general, fucked everybody over. And in return, history chooses to remember her as an entirely different person separate from that somebody else that we have never seen ever again after a certain point actually did those actions and that Rhaena did not. That history chooses to remember the Targaryen that had the last dragon ever hatched before Daenerys' dragons and is one of the only Targaryens that lived past the dance. That history chooses to remember her as somebody who did nothing instead of somebody who fucked everybody over in the Gullet and whatever else after the fact. And in the end, because Fire and Blood is told from the perspectives of 3 people who were not there during the events of the dance and are telling it entirely from secondhand sources, there is nobody alive who can dispute the fact that Rhaena and Nettles were 2 different people. Thus, I believe that it is possible, due to historical revisionism, that Nettles and Rhaena were the same person. Please don't throw me in the dragon pit for this one, because I just like to think about stuff. I just like to analyze the text. I'm really fascinated by historical revisionism and unreliable narration. I am not trying to be a sellout to Ryan Condal and the TV show because I do agree that there have been some missteps and things that I disagree with, but this is just something that I've been thinking about. And sharing this was very difficult for me because the book readers have shooters. Some of the book readers are very passionate about the book being the real story and being as faithful to the book as possible. I just like to think about stuff. Please don't be mean to me. Thanks. Bye.